Welcome, everybody, and thank you for coming out to the fabulous Giant City State Park. It's a perfect afternoon to be indoors, and we are very fortunate to have the Illinois botanizer, or Christopher David Benda, here to talk to us, and he's going to tell us where all the rare plants are. He's going to talk to us about rare plants and their common look-like. So let's give him a hand. Yeah.
Thank you, Jennifer, and the Friends of Giant City State Park for hosting me. This is a brand new presentation that I have not delivered before, talking about rare plants and their common lookalikes. I want to briefly mention, so I don't forget, that my rare plant photography is going to be featured next month here in the visitor center. So starting August 1st, I'm actually going to pair a photograph of a rare plant with a herbarium specimen of a plant that I've collected for science. And you can see the pressed specimen and then the actual photo of the plant in the wild. So that'll be for next month here at Giant City State Park. There we go. So my name is Chris Benda, and currently I work at Southern Illinois University, and I'm the coordinator of the Plants of Concern program. This is a rare plant monitoring program where we use a lot of volunteers to help with the assignments. And this has been underway at the Chicago Botanic Garden for over 20 years. In 2021, the program was expanded to Southern Illinois, and I was hired as the coordinator. So we're out looking for rare plants a lot. Also, you can find me online as Illinois Botanizer. I post on Facebook pretty regularly. I have a YouTube channel, which is where I will put this recording when I'm done today. Check out my website, illinoisbotanizer.com. And then in the picture there, I had a fun side project where I was recertifying state champion trees. So there's 184 native trees in Illinois that could qualify to be a state champion. It's the largest of each species. And I went all around the state. I think I ended up in the 2-year project, I updated about 74 species. And this is the champion bald cypress, which was one of the more challenging trees to measure, as you can see. But on my website, if you go visit there, I want to point you to my plants database. I moved to Illinois in 2004 to go to graduate school at University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. And ever since then, I've been taking photos of plants in Illinois and beyond. So I have them housed on my website. It is very much a work in progress, but I think I have over 1,000 species on there now represented. And I do a number of programming. You know, the in-person stuff's kind of picking up a little bit now, but there's one thing that the pandemic really brought forth was a lot of the virtual presentations. So I do have a fair number of Zoom style presentations that I deliver. So you can see my speaking schedule on the website, or you can subscribe to the mailing list, and I'll send out little reminders when I have programs coming up that you may be interested in. All right, so I want to start with the green Trillium, Trillium viride. And this is kind of an interesting story, actually. It was with Jen here, the naturalist here at the park, and she contacted me and said, I have someone in here who says they have green Trillium on their property. And I thought, I'm skeptical. And at that time, there was only one place where I knew green Trillium occurred in Southern Illinois, and it's actually here at Giant City State Park. So I said, well, see if you can get me a photo. You know, I'm very busy. I'd love to chase down every wild goose, but, you know, I kind of wanted something a little more certain. And so she did text me a photo, and it was green Trillium indeed on private land in, I think it's Union County, which is what the Trillium is here in Giant City State Park as well. And so we went there and counted a few hundred green Trillium plants. And this was maybe 4 or 5 years ago. So that was really interesting. And when I dug into it, I actually found out that there were some biologists who knew that that was there, but it was not in the sort of central database where we keep track of all these locations. So that was added. So then in last year, at the beginning of the year, I knew of 2 locations where green Trillium occurs. And then I was talking to a friend, and he mentioned a property that he had been on 20 years ago and said, I think I saw green trillium there. And I thought, really? And this is someone who would know, what he observed. And so we went there, we got permission. We walked that area, and we found 300 green trilliums there, all blooming pretty much. And that was an unknown location. It was actually in the same stream corridor as the previous one. So then I'm like, okay. So we went downstream and upstream a little further to see if there was more. We didn't find any, but I noticed that there was a side feeder stream that came into that creek. And actually it was owned by the university. So I went there on a hunch thinking, I wonder, this is just the next thing over. It's connected. And we went in there and we counted 500 green trilliums. Nobody knew it was there. So, and then actually the DNR biologists found another one in Jackson County. And then there was one other one as well. So we went from 2 at the beginning of the year to 6, quadrupled or tripled there, the number of green trillium locations. So this one, the key to the identification here is that the sepals are spreading. So the petals are pointing straight up, but this part here would be the sepal, and you can see they're horizontal with the leaves. So our most common trillium is the purple trillium, and those have sepals that are recurved. It's actually called Trillium recurvatum because the sepals point down, and they point down at maturity. Keep in mind, they start, hugging the petals, and then they slowly, form and point down. So what I think what might be most confused with this is, so come back to that, the Sessile Trillium, which in my mind is rare as well. In fact, I've seen way more green trilliums than I've seen Sessile trilliums. So I want to investigate this and think this actually might deserve to be on our threatened and endangered species list. But that's the only other one that's going to have sepals that are spreading, and as well as the flower is right on top of the leaves. It's not stalked. Our white trillium is a common one that has going to have a stalk to the flower. So these are what we call the sessile flowered trilliums, which is why they call it Sessile Trillium. So if we go back to this photo, this is the range, the worldwide range for the green trillium. It's only in Illinois and Missouri. And if it wasn't for it doing so well in Missouri, it might be a federally listed species, because in Illinois, most of those counties it was formerly known in, it hasn't been seen in for a long time. So I know that it's in Jackson and Union in Southern Illinois, and that's with those 6 subpopulations I mentioned. So we counted it's between 500 and 1,000 plants, I would say, at 6 sites in 2 counties. Whereas we look at Sessile Trillium range, much more common. So the dark green state shading means it occurs in that state or has been observed in that state. And then we have it at the county level. So the green counties those are counties where the plant has been observed, and then where it's yellow, that's where it's rare. And if there was an orange one, that's where it used to be, and we know it's been extirpated. So that's kind of the color coding there for those. Now, another one here is the shining false indigo bush, which is really obscure. I wonder if, very many people have even heard of this plant. It is a shrub. It has those wonderful sort of lead plant-like flowers. Lead plant is in the Amorpha genus, but this is the Amorpha nitens, Illinois endangered. And it's similar to Amorpha fruticosa, which is just the false indigo bush. And these are very similar plants. To me, the key to identification is looking at the fruits. So the fruits on the left are for nitens, the rare one, and they're pretty much straight, and they have some bumps on them, but not these big globular sort of warty looking ones that are on the fruticosa, which is on the right. So the fruticosa ones are larger, they're hooked like a letter J, and then they're really warty. So personally, now sometimes when you look at plants over a while, you just start to realize differences that aren't easy to capture or describe or mentioned in the books. So this is like the technical way, the go-to for sure, but there is a little difference in the leaves as well. So the Amorpha nitens is the distribution here. So it's not very common throughout the US. In just a few counties, I think it's Pope, Alexander, and Pulaski. I think there's 4 populations. So definitely a rare one. And then here's the Morpha fruticosa, much more common. And so when you see plants that don't have that particular distinguishing feature, generally as a botanist, you would call it the more common thing. So it's possible that there's more out there. It just wasn't observed at a time when there were fruit available or flowers or whatever characteristic you need. So that's interesting. Now, this is another obscure one here. Fern, black spleenwort fern, Asplenium resiliens. I had not seen this plant until 2021. And it was actually kind of interesting. The Forest Service botanist sort of suggested that very little had been known about this plant in the last 20 years. And it had been known to have been over collected in the past at a certain site. And so it was suggested that we may not find very many. And we went to the first site in Union County, and it was all over the place. It grows on limestone cliffs. So once we found it there, we were inspired to go to all the locations where it had ever been found. And there were 5 in Jackson, Union, and Alexander County. Unfortunately, there was a location, when things were collected long ago, they might say things like found near Gale, 1 mile south of Gale, which is the story in this case. And so we couldn't figure out where that was. We went down to Gale and we looked around for rock outcrops, and there was a lot of private land. So we did not find one of the locations, but at all the other 4, there were plants extant there. So that was really exciting. And what I think is key for identification on this one is generally, so you call it the leaflets or the leaves, they're pinnae. The pinnae are, for the most part, paired. They're opposite from each other. You can see some of them are not quite paired up real well, but for generally they're opposite. And then it has that black rachis, the stem. You see how dark colored that is, hence the name, the black spleenwort fern. I also think that they have sort of a bluish gray color to them rather than really green, because they're similar to the really common ebony spleenwort fern. And this is in every woods. I mean, I make a list everywhere I go, and this is a plant where before you even start, you can just check it off because you know it's going to be there. It's in every single upland forest. It's on rock sometimes. And generally the black spleenwort grows on limestone, but I did see them side by side in this project, which was interesting. And there were ones that I looked at that were tough to decide, but generally they were not. And you can see how the pinnae are alternate arranged here. Another thing too is that they have an auricle, a little ear. So there's like a little thumb sticking up on the leaf. And that brings you to these 2 options. There are other aspleniums out there, but they're not going to have that auricle. And then ferns reproduce with spores, and often the spores are on the leaves themselves, which are the brown structures that you can see on the leaf there. So this is the black spleenwort fern. You can see its distribution, just 3 counties in Illinois, and we determined that they are extant in those 3 counties. Extant meaning present, currently present. And then here's I guess I didn't change that. All right, let's go on to a plant that we actually don't have in Southern Illinois. This grows, the only place in Illinois you can find it is Will County. And this is the Oklahoma grass pink orchid. And if it was not flowering, it would be nearly impossible to find because I'm holding the leaf of the orchid. Just looks like a blade of grass, hence the name, the grass pink orchid. But these were blooming on my visit, which was tremendous. I've actually been to this site numerous times. I took this picture on June 11th, 2013, and I've never seen it again. I've looked for it several times and I could not find it. But there were some new locations that have been found. I think there's 3 or 4 in Will County, but it looks very similar to the regular grass pink orchid, which the Oklahoma grass pink orchid was not described to science until 1994. So up to that point, they were all would have been called tuberoses. And so that, often there are herbarium specimens that exist that you can go and review and look at them and say, well, maybe this was the rarer one. It just wasn't known when it was collected, and you review that. But if there isn't a specimen and it's just noted in the literature, and you think, well, how many of these more common ones that were mentioned could be the rare one? We just didn't know of the rare one at the time. But if you go to the Minnesota Wildflowers website, they use my photo to demonstrate the differences between the 2. So you can see the shape there on the flowers. They're a little more triangular on the Oklahomensis on the left. Diamond shaped on the Oklahomensis versus triangular on the tuberoses. Tuberosus, it's got these little yellow hairs that are on them. Tuberosus tends, excuse me, they tend to flower opening up with one flower at a time, where Oklahomensis, they all bloom together. And on that picture, I had all 3 flowers are blooming at once. So there's a few, and then there's some of them about the length of the leaf, if it's as tall as the plant or taller. So there's a few subtle characteristics to tell these apart, but they're both rare, and they have a little different habitat too. That's very useful when looking at plants. Is you maybe can't exclusively say because it's in this habitat, it's this, but it's another clue to guide identification. So here's the grass pink orchid in Illinois. You can see that it's not quite mapped correctly because that's not Will County, but it is in Will County. More common in Oklahoma, where it was named. It's actually Missouri, I think, is where they first noted the difference. And then this is the Calopogon tuberosus, which used to have there's a county here, Union County. I think that site is gone. It hasn't been seen in a long time. So you got to go up north to find it in Illinois. But my friend and colleague, Travis Neal, went over to Missouri earlier this year, and he said there was a whole bunch of it just across the river. You can almost drive up to it. So that was kind of cool. All right, let's dive into obscurity here a little more, into some sedge examples. This is Carex intumescens, which is currently, I actually should say threatened, Illinois threatened species. And it looks very similar to Carex grayi, which they call mace sedge. Grayi is on the left there, and intumescens is on the right. So it kind of has that globose sort of spike. And one of the differences is that grayi should be hairy on the perigynia. The perigynia are what we're seeing here. That's what's in my hand. If you open up, the perigynia is a paper-like sort of sac that surrounds the fruit being an achene. So you can see the achene outside some of the perigynia. But on grayi on the left there, the spikelets, the perigynia are so jammed tight in there that it has a different shape to the base of the perigynia. They're much more wedge shaped because they got to fit all those bases in together, where on intumescens, they're spaced out a little bit more and they have more room. So the base of the perigynia are much more rounded rather than wedge shaped. And a slight difference in the shape of the perigynia as well. But one other thing too, grayi will have spikelets that or perigynia that point down. And intumescens, they're pointing up or to the side, but not down. And intumescens is something that's becoming much more common. We have, I think, 20 new locations just from last year. So it'll probably get delisted. It's just, plants move around and it's becoming more common. So there's a picture too of this is the intumescens, a really round base to the perigynia. Now these are fun ones too. These are other wetland ones. Gigantea is on the left and Lupuluformis is on the right. And they sort of look similar to each other, but Gigantea has long beaks on the perigynia and they pretty much point straight out horizontally. On Lupuluformis, they kind of go horizontal, but ascending as well. They're just a little different subtleties in the shape, but looking at the achenes, you can see a clear difference. So Gigantea in both pictures is on the left and Lupuluformis on the right. In Gigantea, you can see the top of the fruit, the achene, is almost straight across, and they're really triangular, where on Lupuluformis has a little different shape. It's more of a tapered on both ends of the perigynia, and they're pretty sharp, knobby on the corners, but not quite as much as Gigantea. So this is fun stuff with sedges. And then this is what they look like, Carex lupulina. This is common, all over in every wetland, and this is not really. Sometimes when plants are really common, you realize you don't spend time photographing them. So I had a very limited number of photos to choose, and I felt like this one doesn't really show the difference that well, but it has, it does look different in the field, the spikelets there. So here's Gigantea range, just a few counties in southern Illinois. Here's Lupuluformis, and Lupuluformis has really knobby corners to the achenes. And lupulina can have variable knobbiness. So a lot of the specimens that we have that were labeled Lupuluformis were reviewed by an expert and determined to be lupulina. So we think Lupuluformis is actually rare, and there was just a lot of reports that were erroneous. So we don't have a good understanding of the range on that one, but I know 3 locations for it. And then here's Lupulina, of course, everywhere, common throughout the East. All right, let's go into something pretty. How about downy painted cup, Castellisia sessilifolia? Also, this does not occur in this part of Illinois, but it does occur up in Rock Island County and in the Wachusett grasslands. And you can see it has a funky look to it, and it is sort of yellow flowered. It has large flowers. But I wanted to put this in there just to show that we have another painted cup that are typically red, but they can be yellow. So I wanted to just point out a distinction between, you can have a yellow scarlet painted cup, not to be confused with the downy painted cup in the previous photos. So here's the downy painted cup range, just northern Illinois, the sessilifolia, and then here's the scarlet painted cup, which is, this is sort of historic. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's currently extant in all these counties today. And we don't know without having updated records which ones it still occurs in, but it's not an easy plant to find. So I imagine that it's not at a lot of these counties anymore. It was at one time. All right, now this is a specialty here, the Sangamon phlox. So we have Sangamon County in Illinois, which is where Springfield is. We have the Sangamon River. And this is a subspecies, Sangamonensis, of Phlox pilosa, that is an Illinois endemic. Endemic meaning it only occurs in Illinois. In fact, it only occurs in Piatt and Sangamon counties. And I saw it for the first time on June 10th. We were heading up through that way in Piatt County, just near Mahomet. We pulled off the side of the interstate and went to go find them, and they're growing on the side of the road. So it looks like Phlox pilosa, which is the downy phlox, but the leaves and stems are not hairy. So a little different subspecies, Illinois endangered, because this is the only state where this plant occurs. So that's pretty neat. And then now we have the leafy prairie clover, Dalea foliosa. This example was another reason why I'd been thinking about putting this presentation together for years, actually. This is years in the making. Because I had this photo on another presentation, and someone after the program mentioned, oh yeah, I've seen that. It's all over in this prairie and that prairie. And they were confused, of course, with something else that was similar. So I thought, I'm presenting these rare plants that do look similar to common things. I should clarify this. And so that's how this presentation idea was born. But this is the leafy prairie clover. It was it was considered extirpated from Illinois for many, many years. And it was relocated in the 70s. And it's still persistent to this day. It grows in dolomite up in the northeast part of Illinois. But it kind of looks like our common purple prairie clover. But look at how leafy it is. If you look at a leaflet, there's lots of leaflets, like 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. I mean, like 20 or more leaflets that you can see on the plants. Whereas if you look at our common prairie clovers, the purple and the white prairie clover, they have few leaves. And the picture on the left shows the white and the purple together. So the purple is the lower one, very small leaflets. And then on my fingers there is a leaf for the white prairie clover. So they have larger leaflets, but still few. They don't have anywhere near to 20, 30 leaflets like on the other ones. But that middle photo, could kind of sort of maybe be confused with the leafy prairie clover. So that's why I threw this one in the mix. And we can see the range there, Dalea foliosa. Now this must be former range because I only know of it occurring in Will County currently, but it's population in Wisconsin, Tennessee, Alabama. That's it. So this is federally endangered. It's that rare. This is the only federally endangered plant listed for Illinois. We have a few federally threatened, but this is the only federally endangered plant that occurs in Illinois. The Dalea foliosa. And there's the purple prairie clover all over the place, most counties. And then here's the white, also very similar. And the whites and purples often grow side by side. All right, now look at this little neat one. I had never seen this species until this year. We went in early April up to Monroe County, where they have limestone hill prairies and limestone cliffs. And this grows on the edges of cliffs. As you can see Travis there inspecting the rock very closely for the tiny little whitlow grass. It's actually a mustard. It's not a grass, so not a good name there, but Draba cuneifolia. And a key to identification on this is the notched leaves. So you can see the leaves have a little bit of teeth on them. And then the stem is really hairy, and the fruits are hairy as well. And I had to get that sort of sorted out because I'll tell you, my wife and I did this survey together, and we went up the first day, and I thought if you look at the photo on the left, you can see the hairs. They're branched hairs. It's what we call stellate hairs. Starry is what stellate means. So when I first started looking at this plant, I thought any basal leaves with stellate hairs was it. And then at the end of the survey, we realized that Draba reptans can have straight hairs or stellate hairs, and that is not the character to look for. So we actually went back and repeated the survey because we felt like we counted some of the plants that weren't it. So it's not just the stellate hairs on the basal leaves. And you can see, look at the dime there in the middle picture. That's one little tiny plant that we found in flower. But so the thing that I thought was really great is if you had fruits, look at how hairy the fruit are and how hairy the stem is. So that combined with the notch and the teeth in the leaves are the key to identification for Draba cunifolia, because Draba reptans here looks pretty much the same. This picture here shows the straight hairs that it had. Well, I learned later that it can also have the stellate hairs. So it's a little bit more variable, but a little tiny white mustard. And these are annuals. So you have to go early April, because by late April, they're gone, dried up, and you're not going to find them. So I'd never seen that before. That was neat. Here's the whitlow grass, common to the west and in Missouri, all over Draba cunifolia, but just a few counties in Illinois, versus the Draba reptans is it's basically a weed, honestly. All right, let's go on to this one, Heteranthera reniformis. So this is kidney leaf mud plantain. So I had a grant from the Illinois Native Plant Society to look at 2 species and determine their current distribution. And this was one of them. And there were 5 places listed in the database in 2 counties or 3 counties. And none of them had been seen since 1999. So that was interesting. So I went to all of those 5 locations and I didn't find this plant at any of them. But I chance encountered it at 4 additional sites. And they were in essentially illegal off-road activity on an old road, created these muddy, wet ruts and wheel ruts. And that's where this plant likes to grow. So when I first saw it, I thought, well, this can't be the endangered plant. It's growing in the mud pit, you know? And then I'm reading into it and that's where it likes to grow. Open, wet mud, full sun. So three of the locations in Polk County we found were on the Cheyenne National Forest, where presumably illegal off-road activity occurred, creating these rutted out muddy areas, and there was just all kinds of this growing. And then we found a site down in Alexander County, which is actually an oxbow from the Cache River. And we were there for a different plant, and we found thousands and thousands, uncountable numbers of it. Just carpet throughout the wetland. Anywhere where it was open mud was just loaded with this kidney leaf mud plantain. And if we had not found any of those 4 locations, we would have said this plant is extirpated from Illinois. It's gone, as far as current knowledge is aware. So, and 2 of the 5, I further determined that 2 of the 5 sites were erroneous. They were this species that was listed there. Oh, well, yeah, this one here, the Heteranthera missouriensis, much more common. So you can see it. If we go back to the reniformis, see how it's almost wider than it is long. It really has that strong reniform shape, or that sort of heart shape to it. And this one here has it similar, but not to the same extent. Excuse me. But really, clearly, and we can see here another photo, the leaves are much shinier, they're larger, and they're about as wide as they are long. They grow in big colonies, but the flowers are purple. That's one easy way. The reniformis had white flowers, and these are purple. So 2 of the locations actually had this plant there that I know that they were erroneously labeled. So really exciting update for that particular plant in Illinois. So there's the reniformis distribution, and then the this may be a nomenclature issue, basically, because this is some names changed on that. Well, let's go on to this crested coral root orchid. We're currently underway for this orchid. It blooms in late July, and we found this plant at all the locations it had ever been known to occur last year, which was 15 subpopulations at 8 sites, I believe, 5 counties. So that was really exciting, and we've already started counting this year, and we're finding a few hundred. And I guess I put it in there because it's sort of similar to, we have other coral root orchids, a spring and a summer one, or a spring and a fall, but those ones are like this big and they're non-green. Where this one's about 2 feet tall, I would say. So much larger. They don't bloom at the same time of year. So they're really not that similar, other than that they are non-green, brownish color little orchids that bloom in the woods. So here's the spicata distribution. And then these are the other two. The Odontorhiza is on the left, which is the fall coral root orchid, and the Wisteriana on the right, which is the spring one. So a little more common on those two. Now let's go to climbing milkweed. This is another species I had never seen before until last year. And we went to all the locations, and we went to all the locations this year. There were 9 in the database, and 4 or 5 of them were incorrect. This is hard stuff. If this were easy, everyone would be a botanist, right? So this is very subtly different than obliqua. So on this one, it's got a deep maroon color. The petals are pretty wide, and they're wide. They're sort of flared out towards the tip. And then the center of the flower is a deep maroon color as well. If we go to the other similar climbing milkweed, and then the obliqua and decipiens both have fruits that are covered in spines. So you can really only tell them apart when they're flowering. Versus we have another more common climbing milkweed that doesn't have spines on the fruit. And that one has a green flower to it, and it's much more common. But of these maroon flowered ones, they both have spiky fruits. You have to look at the flowers, and here's the other one. So the petals are a little more narrow. They don't get wider as you go towards the tip, and then they're a little lighter color of maroon in the center. But pretty subtle there differences. And so 4 of the reports were actually obliqua and not decipiens that were in the database. So again, really good work updating, getting these issues sorted out. So there's the range on decipiens, just a few counties. And then on the obliqua, it's a little bit more on the eastern side of the forest. And now fame flowers. We have 3 species in Illinois. 2 are rare and 1 is less rare, I would say. But this is the large flowered fame flower. This is also called flower of an hour because each flower only lasts for a single day and typically about an hour that they bloom. And this one, so unfortunately, there's only 1 site left for this species in Illinois, and it's privately owned. But I've been there. They bloom about 2 p.m. And they all, we were there. Some friends were out there this year, and they were like, "Oh, none are blooming. We want to see them bloom." And they were working. And they went and took lunch, and they came back, and boom, they were all blooming. Hundreds of them. So they're doing well at that site, but that's all that's left. But look at the stamens here, the little yellow parts in the flower. Lots of stamens. So 10 to 45 stamens for Phemeranthus calicinus, the large flowered fame flower. They're little succulents. Compare that to the small flowered fame flower, which is also rare in Illinois, Phemeranthus parviflorus. And this one only has 4 to 8 stamens. So an easy way to tell them apart is by looking at the number of stamens. Of course, the flowers need to be open. And this one, I found that they bloom about 6 o'clock. Late in the day, I've seen them open. And they're just at a few sites, really, mostly in Johnson County. But we found 3 new locations for this plant last year and this year. So that was fun. But here you can see the succulent leaves there, which is often all that you can see of the plant until you get there when it's the right bloom time. And then the cute little pink flowers bloom. And then the more common of the 3 is the Phemeranthus rugospermis. And basically, this one has lots of stamens like the large flowered one, but the flowers are a little bit smaller. So you can compare those that way. But otherwise, if you just looked at the leaves, they look very similar. But this is more northern in distribution. Oh, there's the calicinus, the calicinus, 1 county in Illinois. Here's the parviflorus, just 3. It's Union, Johnson, Pope. And then here's the rugospermis, more common up north. I see it in the Chusa grasslands regularly when I go visit there. We saw it at Castle Rock State Park. So a lovely little fame flower. Now, let's do another orchid. These will be blooming soon. They don't occur in southern Illinois, but they are similar to one that does. So this is the purple fringed orchid, Platanthera psychotes. Extraordinary wildflower. There's only a few sites where this occurs, and I've been to most of them. They have a much longer inflorescence, full of flowers, and the petals are pretty fringy. And in some cases, you might encounter the rare white form of the purple fringed orchid. I took these photos in Cook County. So we don't get this one this far south, but down here we get the purple fringeless orchid. Oh, I have a typo. It should be fringeless. Purple fringeless orchid is the Heteranthera paramina, which has some fringes to the petals, but not deeply fringed like previously. Also, a much smaller inflorescence with more spaced out flowers, and occurs in the southern part of the state. Like here at Giant City State Park. I have a go-to spot here. I didn't go to them this year, but I did see a number of them at some other sites. So here's the Psychotes. You got to go up north to see that one. You can go up to northern Wisconsin and see it on the roadside. But rare in Illinois, and then the purple fringeless orchid there, just southern in distribution. Okay, now let's look at Spiderwort, the prairie spiderwort. So we have 4 species of Tradescantia in Illinois, and the other 3 are all fairly common. This is the prairie one, Tradescantia bracteata, and several things distinguish it from the other spiderworts. One, it's rhizomatous, so you're going to find it in big colonies where they're connected underground. Very small, narrow flowers, low-growing plants, and then if you look at the sepals, very hairy. The only really short spiderwort we have is the Virginia spiderwort, Virginiana, and that plant is going to be hairy all over, and it's going to, it's the only low-growing one. The flower color is even a little bit different. It's not rhizomatous. The leaves are wider. The plant is hairy, although they both have hairy sepals that I'm showing here. This one has the eglandular, which means not glandular. Like glands are like a pinhead on a hair. So that's kind of interesting. And this plant I've never seen in Illinois before, but actually the friend that told me about the green trillium spot told me about how he saw this along the road, and it's not known in Jackson County. This is a county record. In fact, here's the distribution. Jackson is probably 3 counties removed from where its closest location is in Illinois. But this grows on Shawnee National Forest land along a road, and he was driving and he saw purple and he just pulled over, and he's that kind of person, we say botanist has one eye on the road, one eye in the ditch. You're making finds that way, and he told me about it, and that's the only spot we have of that in Southern Illinois for the prairie spiderwort. All right, let's look at some shooting stars. We have our namesake species here, French's shooting star. For a long time was thought to only occur in Southern Illinois, but now it's been found in Missouri and Kentucky and Alabama, Tennessee. But it only grows along the drip line of sandstone bluffs and overhangs and such. So this species was discovered, new to science, here at Giant City State Park by Dr. French, who was the first botany professor at SIU. And he found this plant at Giant City, and it was later described and named in his honor. Originally Dodecatheon Frenchii, and it's updated to Primula Frenchii now. But they tend to have white flowers, and they have leaves that have a stalk on them, and the leaves are a lighter colored green. But probably the best really is habitat. It only grows at the base of sandstone cliffs or sandstone rocks. I've seen it on ledges, sandstone ledges too, which the common one can grow there as well, but generally it's separated by habitat. We also have the rare jeweled shooting star in Illinois, but it grows along the western part of the state, not this far south. And it tends to be a drier species with often darker colored flowers. You really got to look at the thickness of the capsule. Honestly, it's the way to tell them apart, but that's a little more obscure. But we don't get that one this far south, but and almost every county, I think in Illinois, has the common shooting star, Primula media, named after Samuel Mead. And you can see it in full glorious bloom here. So these will have leaves that are not with no stalk on them. They're darker green color. They grow generally in a drier habitat, gravel prairies or on the bluff tops and such. At Bellsmith Springs, you can see both of them, where the common one is on the woods on the top and the Frenchies is below the rock. So 3 different kinds of shooting stars in Illinois. You can see Frenchii range there. Again, we thought for a long time it was only Southern Illinois, and it was found in adjacent states. Well, not Tennessee, I mentioned earlier, but Indiana is the one, and even Arkansas. And here's the jeweled shooting star. It's really just a few counties in the western part of Illinois and up north. And then the common shooting star, almost every county in Illinois. So this is a shrub here, the American strawberry bush, Euonymus americanus, Illinois threatened species. So Euonymus is the same genus as winter creeper, which is a vine that is invasive. And it's the same genus as the winged wahoo or fire shrub or burning bush or whatever common name you want to use. So it's nice to highlight that we have native Euonymus species. They're, generally the cultivated kinds, there may be showier or have more flowers, or in this case, it's the red foliage in the fall that people really enjoy. So the invasive Euonymus is often planted in people's yards, but here's an alternative that's native, the American strawberry bush. It has sessile leaves, meaning no stalks. It has these capsules that have bumps all over them, and they have green stems. And then when the capsules are ripe, they open, showing the orange seeds inside, or the fruits. So they call it hearts of bustin' with love. It's another common name for this one. We have another native Euonymus. Oh, this one also has cream colored flowers, like a yellowish sort of translucent flower. Or if you look at another native wahoo, this is Euonymus purpureus. This one has maroon flowers instead of cream flowers. It has a stalk on the leaf, and the fruits don't have the bumps on them. They're smooth. So there's 3 easy ways to tell apart our 2 native Euonymus species, with this one, americanus, being threatened in Illinois, somewhat rare. Great place to see this is right along the trail at Heron Pond. Shortly after you cross the bridge on the trail, you can see the beautiful strawberry bush. And this grows on the Trillium Trail, actually, by the way. It's a neat one. So here's Euonymus americanus range. Just a few counties in the south, and then here's the Purpureus all over the state. All right, a few more slides here. Here's cliff club moss, not a moss. It's a fern ally of lycophyte, and this is Purpurea, Illinois threatened species. It looks pretty much the same as Purpurea lucidula, but you have to look at magnification of leaves. And so this is lucidula. It's got teeth on the leaves. If you look very closely, you can see little notches there. And on the Purpurea, this one here does not have those. So this one's listed as threatened. This one is not listed. It's actually, they're about as rare as each other in southern Illinois, but the lucidula occurs in other parts of Illinois where the Purpurea does not. And that's why that one's listed and the other one isn't. But it likes moist, cool, shaded sandstone canyons. So, Bell Smith, and there's some at Camp Ondasonk and Little Grand Canyon, of course, places like that. You see the 2 types of club moss, which are, again, not actual mosses, but fern allies. So there's the range for Purpurea and then lucidula. Now the Illinois wood sorrel. So this is a species that was actually discovered as new to science by John Schwegman, who was our state botanist of Illinois for a long time, over 30 years. And he actually has 2 species that he found in Illinois that had not been described, that had been unknown. They were new to science, and he actually described them both. So this one is Oxalis illinoisensis, and it's basically large. The flowers are large, the leaves are large, and it's not very hairy, but see, the flowers are almost 2 centimeters broad. So you contrast that with the really common weedy sort of garden, weed and stuff, the yellow wood sorrel. It is native. And I know you can't really see the size of the flowers really well, but they're half as big, they're small. And this can have variable leaves. They can have large leaves sometimes, and it can be hairy or not hairy. But generally, the Illinois wood sorrel is a very large flower. And if you look at the center of the flower, there's kind of red streaks to it. So that's another thing that I've noticed is a useful character for that. But it's Illinois threatened. There's the worldwide range of the Oxalis illinoisensis. It's kind of interesting that it was found and discovered in Illinois when it's more common in these other states. Illinois is barely represented there. But, John was the one looking, and he thought this doesn't look like, the more similar one. So he described it as new. Really exciting in Illinois. And then there's Oxalis stricta, every single county in Illinois. We could probably walk out here and find it right away somewhere. It's that kind of a weedy species. Now, this plant I really like, Harvey's Buttercup, Ranunculus harveyi. We have 29 species of Ranunculus in Illinois, and they can be somewhat similar. But the key to this one is that it has some leaves that are lobed and some that aren't. And it associates with sandstones. You can see it on the sandstone cliff here. This is in Jackson County. And here's a closer look with it. So my colleague, Travis Neal, he taught me that you just got to take a selfie with all the rare plants. So try to remember to do that when possible. But basically, there's a small flowered buttercup that is another native species, but very weedy. Probably have it in your yard or seen it in your garden. That one has petals that are so small you can barely see them. And these have much longer petals to them. So that's the main difference between the two. So I want to point out harveyi is rare. It's only in Jackson, and it's only in 3 or 4 counties in Illinois, where the small flowered buttercup is in every county, all over, common, in the spring. But these have big petals on the flowers. I actually found a new location for this. This was added to the threatened species list in 2020. So the last review was added as rare, and I think it might even be endangered. We went to all the places that we could find for it in Southern Illinois, and I think we had 7 locations, and one of them was new. I was on my friend's property walking the bluff and totally didn't expect it. And here's Ranunculus harveyi in full bloom. And I thought, wow, that's neat. So that was a new spot. But there's the range for that, more common in Missouri and Arkansas. All right, I got just a few more slides. We're getting close to the end. This is a buffalo clover, Trifolium reflexum, of which the largest population in Southern Illinois occurs here at Giant City State Park, and it had a tremendous year this year. This is a biennial. So they have little first-year plants that won't flower, and then the second year they flower, then they die. So they have to set seed in order for the population to continue. And this was known from 2 sites in Jackson County. And Touch of Nature built all these cycling trails a couple of years ago, and they hired me to do a rare plant survey along the proposed route so that they could reroute the trail if there was anything found. Well, I found buffalo clover there. It had not been known. In fact, I found a number of rare plants at Touch of Nature, and they didn't have any of those that were known to occur there. So that was a fun project. But the buffalo clover was there, and I went to go find it after the bike trails were built, and I couldn't find any. And it kind of looked sort of like the bike trail went through where they were. And I was like, oh, I don't think that was good. But then this last year, they were everywhere. We actually, so they call buffalo clover because the buffalo would create a disturbance, and this is where they would grow. They were associated with the bison, where they would rut and wallow and create a mess. They like that disturbance, and that's where the clover would grow. This is all over on the bike trail this last year that we call it bicycle clover now, because it likes to associate with the bicycle trail. So actually the trails probably were good because they were blooming all along the edge of the trail. Sometimes in the middle of the trail was where they were found this last year. And you can see the seed heads when they dry up and they go to fruit, they nod over. That's the reflexed part, reflexum. Now you're thinking, I've seen this plant, it grows in my lawn, right? Those are the European white clovers. On our white clover, the European white clover, the flowers are on their own stalk and the leaves are on their own stalk. They're not together. And this rare one here in Illinois, there are leaves on the same stalk as the white flowers. And the flowers can sometimes be pink or red as well, but often white. So there are 3 sites in Jackson County for this. And the one at Giant City, we couldn't even count them all. We had to estimate thousands of them.
When do they bloom?
They bloom in mid to late May. Is the best time to see them. And you see the range there. It's actually throughout the state in that one, but still pretty rare. And then I have the Turk's cap lilies. I just sorted this one out like 2 weeks ago. If you look in the books, they talk about anther length. It's very, the Lilium superbum, right? Not superbum, it's the superb lily. So you think it's superbum is very similar to the Michigan lily, this one here. And the books all talk about anther length being longer. So the anthers would be the black parts there. They're going straight up and down. they'll be longer for superbum than on michiganense until this year. I found this plant. And look at it, that's a small flower. It's got really long anthers. We said, okay, anther length is no good. Can't use that. What can you use? What I think works best are two things. The style color. So the style is the curved part there, and you can see it's got a brown, tip there. That's the stigma, but the actual tube part is the style, and it's greenish yellow. If you go on michiganense, I didn't put a very good photo. It's orange. It's the color of the tepals. So you can see it kind of in the middle there and kind of buried under the anthers over there. So different color styles. And then also the superbum will have, we call the green star. The inner part of the petals or the tepals there has a greenish color to them. So we'll have between the style color and the petals, you can see the difference. Although the superbum, as the name implies, is superb. It's a much bigger plant, much bigger flowers, more flowers and everything. But lilies often don't bloom because they need a lot of light, and they're also eaten by deer a lot. So it's one thing to know where there's a lily, and then you got to go to the right time of year, and it may be hard to get there. And then when you get there, you hope they're blooming. And if they're not, then you can't tell, and you got to come back, maybe another year. So this is a hard one to sort out. And this is the only place where I've seen Lilium superbum is at Bellsmith Springs. We saw it in my flora class there a couple weeks ago, and it was just exquisitely beautiful. So very subtly different, I would say, but between the style color, and then there's also, they talk about the ridge on the tepals. There's another character. They're more ridged on the superbum. But there's the range of Lilium superbum. There's a few counties, and where michiganense, of course, statewide, much more common. So it's a smaller plant, smaller flowers than the Michigan lily. Okay, this is the last one I'm going to profile. The Forbes' saxifrage, because this was also discovered here at Giant City State Park, is new to science, but not all authorities agree that it's a full species. In any event, this one grows on rock. So at Little Grand Canyon, Panther Den, Giant City, it comes straight out of the sandstone. So it's pretty rare in its distribution, where it's similar to Saxifraga pennsylvanica, the swamp saxifrage, which is a wetland plant, really. It grows in fens and wet places, and not many places down here. Another key difference is that the petals are longer than the sepals. So the petals are the white parts, and the sepals would be green, and you can't even really see them that well because they're obscured by the longer petals. So that's a neat plant, also discovered here at Giant City State Park. So there you have some comparisons of some rare plants, and there are more common lookalikes. In some cases, they're pretty easily distinguished. In other cases, they're kind of subtle. So you can use the known range and habitat or other useful clues. And it's really great to have people out there looking at plants, thinking, what do we have here? Let me know if you find something that you think may be, rare or worth monitoring, and I would be happy to do that. So then I will conclude the slideshow, and if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.